taking a walk down here in the Sukhumvit neighborhood here in Bangkok. I'm gonna go to the park, Benjasiri Park up here at Prompong, and I want to talk about an interesting subject today that caught my attention when I was listening to the BBC News this morning. This is one of my habits. I have a coffee, I listen to the BBC, I've been doing it for years, even when they annoy me, which they do a lot, and today they annoyed me. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna make a video about it. They were talking about an incident in Australia, and the presenter immediately stated, Australia is not a third world country. It's an interesting terminology that's used. It's quite common in Western countries. And they didn't mention Thailand or anything, but it did jog my memory of a lot of times where I've talked to Westerners, especially when I was back home, and they would refer to Thailand as a third world country. I think that a lot of the perceptions of Thailand come from pop culture references, especially Hollywood. Most famous movie, probably Hangover 3. It portrayed Thailand as very dilapidated, very dangerous, very dirty, and it really only showed a small glimpse. It took the worst of Thailand and tried to portray it as all of Thailand, especially Bangkok. It would be like going to Los Angeles, going to Skid Row, and saying, look, that's Los Angeles. And I think that that's given people an impression that's very inaccurate. And even the news media doesn't seem very good at providing a realistic impression of a city like Bangkok, a non-Western city. Even though the rate of development here and in Asia in general has been so fast. If you came here even 10 years ago, the city looks very, very different. Walking through M Sphere Mall. This is the newest of Bangkok's luxury malls. There are a lot of them. I don't really know how they actually get the shoppers for so many luxury malls. And this is just an example of the third world conditions of Thailand. I'm gonna go back to a couple of examples that I encountered when I was in Canada. So in 2019, I went back because I was doing an education degree, and I had a course, and I brought up the transportation system in Bangkok as a reference of how it's better than the transportation system in my home city of Toronto. The professor immediately interjected that we can't compare ourselves to third world countries. He seemed to assume that I was gonna favorably compare Toronto. No, I was saying Toronto was much worse and that we haven't built nearly enough stations. And if you take a city like Bangkok, their entire transportation network has been built out in the past 15 to 20 years, and they're adding new stations and new lines every couple of years now. I was giving a favorable comparison, and I was shut down immediately by a professor that has an image of Thailand and Bangkok as a third world country. Here you have extreme levels of development, extreme levels of wealth. You also have poverty. You also have poverty in Western countries. We're much more similar in reality than sometimes media, especially in Western countries, wants to make things out to be. They want to portray that the West is always better. A few months ago, there was an incident that went viral here in Thailand, and this occurred when a Western woman made a video talking about how men that go abroad are looking to take advantage of uneducated and poor women in countries like Thailand, Colombia, and the Philippines. The content went viral here in Thailand because people were very offended that they were being called uneducated and poor. It had to frame everything negatively, but it may be that there's a lot of positive in Asian society right now in terms of family culture, the values, and people look at that and say, wow, that looks really good. Maybe they have more to offer. Instead of framing things negatively, it may be that Asia is just doing things better and they're attracting more and more people that want to join. Asia may actually be leading in values and development in a lot of categories. came across a TikTok video just the other day. The person had spent a couple of weeks here and was critical of Americans who decide to come to Thailand, find themselves, because he views this as taking advantage of the society and appropriating, the cultural appropriation, because you get these, well, they are kind of morons, but the ones that go and get the elephant suits and corn rolls a week into their trip, start talking about enlightenment. We've all encountered these ones before. The producer was essentially telling Americans not to travel to Thailand because they're taking advantage of people's poverty. And then in the comment section of this video, you had a lot of Westerners who clearly had never visited Thailand applauding this guy. And in the same comment section, you had all these Thai people encouraging people to come and visit and welcoming foreigners. You encounter these attitudes amongst foreigners that presume to speak for countries like Thailand, for Thai people, tell them what they should think, that they're oppressed, that they're victims. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to frame Thailand as some sort of utopia. There are plenty of issues in Thailand, high level of inequality, high rates of poverty, and there are definitely much higher rates of extreme poverty because they don't have the social safety nets here. However, over the last 20 years, a lot of people have come out of poverty, and I would say that most of Asia in general has been going in the right direction. The middle class has increased substantially, and I think a lot of the assumptions that exist in Western countries are simply outdated. They're based on 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Western countries are actually going in the wrong direction. Inflation, social problems. Canada has a significant cost of living crisis. Everything's extremely expensive, and essentially everybody's poorer. And I think sometimes that maybe media, maybe elites like to point the finger at other countries. They point the finger at all these non-Western countries as being inferior in comparison. And I do think they are largely disguising failures on a governance level to improve the lives of the citizens over the past 10 to 20 years. Back in Canada, we've had Trudeau for about 10 years now. His solution to most problems is to play dress up as a way of solving problems the Trudeau way. I mean, he actually went in blackface as a 30-year-old teacher at a time, like in the 90s, when everybody knew this was entirely wrong. He was out there doing it at so many events that he forgot, and there kept being pictures appear of him. I had to say, he doesn't remember how many times he went out dressed like this. This is the guy we elected for identity politics to be anti-racist. The one politician, probably in Canadian history, who dressed up like this on a regular basis. Somehow this is the guy we have as the anti-racist. So that turned into a political rant, an anti-Trudeau rant very, very quickly. I don't know, maybe he'll win again. We call him Teflon Trudeau because nothing seems to defeat him. I don't know if you're familiar with Canadian politics. A lot of my viewers are from the United States. You guys have very much the same identity politics issues. It is like an episode of Black Mirror sometimes, if you've ever watched that show, looking in on Western politics from outside. Very different worldview you start to build because you're outside the bubble of groupthink, and yet you're not part of the bubble of Thailand's groupthink either. You kind of end up falling by the wayside of any bubble. And so after listening to the BBC report today, I did make sure to come out to one of Bangkok's many beautiful, modern, very non-third world environments. The reality is that most places around the world, most cities actually resemble each other in the sense that there are significant pockets of wealth and development, and then there are pockets of poverty. And we definitely have that in Bangkok. You can go in behind a lot of the glitz and glam, and you will find significant poverty. And I'm very critical of TikTokers and all these people that come here and just say how great everything is too, because there are definitely issues. Again, it's this comparative thing. It's like every country has its own issues, has its own problems, and also has very positive sides. It's just that comparative frame of categorizing places like Thailand, non-Western countries, as somehow just categorically being lower we're number one, first world. Second world doesn't even exist anymore. That was actually the communist bloc, and it long since disintegrated. So the whole terminology is extremely flawed. The fact that the BBC uses it is just totally ridiculous. All right, that's it from sunny Bangkok today. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you next time.